Welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin Jennings. I'm the CEO of Lambda Legal. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm very grateful that you're all joining us today for our second annual national call on the unstoppable future of trans and non-binary rights in America. I have an all-star cast of plaintiffs and attorneys joining me today, who I will introduce when the time comes. But I'd like to start with just a few slides to give you an overview of where we are as a country right now in the fight for equality for trans and non-binary people. As you're undoubtedly aware, we are facing what can only be described as an avalanche of anti-LGBT legislation in America right now. In 2022, there were 267 anti-LGBTQ plus bills introduced into state legislatures around the country. 27 of them became law. That number skyrocketed. Oh boy, having a problem with my slide here. Not quite sure what's happening with my slide here, but I'll just do it verbally then. In 2023, that number escalated to 510 anti-LGBTQ plus bills, which is a 91% increase in 1 year, and 84 of them became law. And I'm sorry to tell you, this year, 2024, things have not gotten better. In fact, they've escalated further, with 515 anti-LGBTQ plus bills having been introduced into 40 state legislatures around the country, with 35 having become law. If you're good at math, you have figured out that in the last 2 years, nearly 1,300 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been introduced, and they've become law in almost 140 cases. A lot of people want to think this is something happening in just one part of America, but the reality is it is happening nationwide. Only the states of Illinois, New York, and Delaware did not have an anti-LGBTQ plus bill in the 2023 legislative session. And as I said a moment ago, 84 of those became law in 23 different states. Every red state on my map has an anti-LGBTQ plus law on the books right now. As I said before, things didn't get better this year. We have 515 anti-LGBTQ plus bills in 40 states. You may wonder why the number of states has declined somewhat. That's because some states like Texas only meet every other year. And 35 of them have become law in 13 states, every red state, including in the past 2 weeks, a ban on trans healthcare in South Carolina and a Don't Say Gay or Trans law in Louisiana. Lambda Legal is fighting back in 29 states. In every blue state, Lambda Legal has active litigation as we play our role as the LGBTQ plus community's last line of defense. Unfortunately, in many states, we do not have the votes to stop such bills from becoming law, which means it is Lambda Legal that is the community's last hope. And can we strike them down in court is the last hope of stopping bigotry from becoming law. Now, specifically, it pertains to today's call. There are 24 states that currently restrict access for trans youth, all of the red states that you see on the map in front of you. Lambda Legal and our allies are fighting back in 16 states. In all of the blue states, there is an active challenge to these laws. Now, here's the terrifying part. As if it wasn't bad enough that 24 states have already enacted anti-trans laws, 20 more are considering doing so this year. So we are facing a national crisis at the moment in which the health, safety, and equality of particularly trans and non-binary people is under a full-scale assault in America. And that is what we're doing about it is the purpose of today's call. One thing we're doing is educating America about the reality of trans and non-binary lives. And I would love to share with you now a video from our Speak Out campaign, which features the voices of trans and non-binary people, primarily youth, in their own words, talking about what their lives are like. So if we could roll the video, that would be great.
Pride means to me being unabashedly yourself and alive and free and out there.
Pride means an opportunity for people who aren't as able to be open about their sexuality or their gender, to be able to come to a space and be celebrated and not fear harm or rejection.
To me, pride means celebration, community, being able to celebrate who we are despite all the things we're going through.
Pride means to me everything that I represent, and that is being an African-American man of trans experience.
It means that I never have to second guess myself. It means that I can live a happy and fulfilled life. It means that life is worth it.
Pride is a way of enjoying yourself, loving yourself, and being yourself. At the end of the day, we are all human, and we should treat each other with respect.
Thank you for that great video, and happy Pride Month, which is how I should have started the call. One of the stars of the video, and even more importantly, one of the heroic plaintiffs in one of our lawsuits challenging some of the hateful laws that are being passed around the country, is with us to speak to us first. Percy Batista Pedro is a rising high school senior. Percy, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Hello, I am Percy Batista Pedro. My pronouns are he, they, and I live in Iowa, where I'm about to enter my senior year of high school. Thank you for having me today. I am one of the plaintiffs in Land Illegal's lawsuit fighting SF 496, known as the Don't Say LGBTQ in Banned Books law. SF 496 is a law passed in Iowa that bans talk of gender or sexuality in grades K through 6, bans books with descriptions of sex acts, and forces schools to out students to their parents, even if they know it will be dangerous to do so. With this lawsuit, we are working to end this oppressive law, keeping all books on library shelves and keeping LGBTQ+ youth safe and recognized. This law puts a target on the back of queer youth, transgender youth especially, kids like me. I joined this lawsuit because I could not stand being quiet when I had the opportunity and the support system to do something. So many kids, including many of my close friends, do not have the support or ability to fight this, which is exactly why it is a fight that needs to be fought. For all the voices of the suffering youth who cannot be heard and cannot speak up in the face of this oppressive legislation, I must be heard. This attack against us has made many scared to be themselves and walk through school halls or attend LGBT safe space clubs, such as gender and sexuality alliances. This is especially harmful because these groups, for some, can be the only community that they have. Suicide rates of LGBTQ+ youth are already unbelievably high and can only be expected to increase with the recent onslaught of government involvement in our lives. Legislation should be made to increase access to mental health resources, to do everything possible to lower the suicide rates for all young people. But instead, my state is passing laws like SF 496 that will have a negative effect on this number. Should I have to argue that the fact this is happening is wrong? Must I justify that I'm a person deserving of life, liberty, and happiness? Some think I must. But fear of my joy should not control my life. I cannot succumb to ignorance and fear of change. Next year, I'm going to be a senior, and I'm going to have to leave behind many friends and my GSA when I graduate. I cannot find peace with leaving them to struggle under the effects of this law. I can only hope and fight for it to be struck down before then. Myself and all queer youth are children, just wanting space to discover ourselves and books to inspire us. We are people, deserving of a chance at happiness and community. That is all. Thank you for listening.
Percy, I know I speak for everybody on the Lambda team and everybody who's listening to you today when I say how much we admire and respect you. It takes enormous courage as a high school student or a person of any age to sue the governor of your state. Thank you for standing up for people who are unable to stand up for themselves.
Thank you.
We are going to transition now to Sasha Buchert. Sasha is the director of Lambda Legal's Nonbinary and Trans Rights Project. And Sasha is going to present some of the work we're doing to combat hateful laws, such as the one that Percy is suing to block in Iowa. Sasha.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and thanks everybody for joining, and thank you so much, Percy, for your thoughts and profound insight, and thank you for standing up. I'm going to just spend about 10 minutes, a little less than that, talking about the state of play with regard to the cases, and focus specifically on the bills targeting transgender and non-binary youth. But before I jump into that, I just want to say a couple of things. One is express my gratitude for not only the shoulders of our transgender elders, who we stand on, for all of the work they have done, but also for the trans youth and non-binary youth out there. It's so incredible. I just can't wait to see where you all lead us into the future. And I just am so grateful for everything you do. And I want to say that you're amazing, you're loved, and that we'll keep fighting for you until everyone can experience full liberation. So I'm going to, as I said, jump into this real quick and go through some of the different issue areas. I don't have time to go into everything, but I'll discuss the most commonly discussed issues. And one is sports. Kevin showed a picture of Becky earlier here on the left. That's one of our lead plaintiff in West Virginia, challenging a sports ban there, and just an incredible family. And this trans youth just make me cry when I think about all of the amazing advocacy they've been doing over the last few years. But Becky stood up and said, "No, I'm not gonna disappear. I'm not gonna be denied the right to participate in sports and bond with my peers and have all of those things that you learn from being able to participate." And so she filed a lawsuit, with Lambda Legal. And then on the right is Luke Esquivel, who is a trans teen in Tennessee, who he just wanted to play golf with the golf boys team. And the state of Tennessee said, no, you can't do that. And so he said no, and came to Lambda Legal, and we filed a lawsuit. And in both cases, we were able to secure victories, allowing them to participate fairly. In Becky's case, the case, went all the way up to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. And just as a quick law school primer, there's 3 different levels. There's the trial court and an appeals court, and then the Supreme Court. And her case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court at one point, and the Supreme Court refused to enforce the ban on her being able to participate. So it went to the Fourth Circuit, and we just about a month ago received a really powerful decision on her behalf, allowing her to participate. Likewise, in Tennessee, Luke is able to participate, along with his peers. And there's other cases moving forward. The stars represent, cases being brought by other groups. And, there's a case that went up to the Ninth Circuit, where there was a favorable decision in Idaho pretty recently. So that's just a little bit of a landscape, where we are with the sports bans across the country. Another issue area that's frequently discussed is the issue of access to healthcare to treat gender dysphoria. And this picture isn't a picture of our plaintiffs. I'd like to feature pictures of our plaintiffs wherever possible, but I think it sends the message that we can't use a picture of the extreme hostility that trans people experience, trans youth experience, in states where we've had to move forward with pseudonyms, with John Doe or Jane Doe rather than the real name, just because of the immense amount of hostility that this issue has raised in a lot of places. And it's just absolutely incredible that so many families are still willing to stand up and fight the bans. Lambda Legal has played an instrumental role in many of the lawsuits being filed around the country challenging these bans. As you can see, there's challenges that we filed in Montana and Oklahoma and Texas, Louisiana and Missouri. I saw somebody on the comments that was from Missouri. So yeah, definitely there. Tennessee, North Carolina, and that's probably more lawsuits to follow probably. And there's been a great amount of success, and even in conservative parts of the country. For example, we filed a challenge in Tennessee, and it was it's a very conservative state, with a conservative judge, and we're able to secure an amazing victory there. Where the court, the trial court who was closest to, the folks challenging the bans and the experts, have issued really powerful decisions. Unfortunately, a lot of those cases have been appealed to that second layer, and some of those courts have just refused to really grapple, in my opinion, with the expert information and the facts, and have issued rulings going the other way. And right now there is a case that we worked on in Tennessee that's been consolidated with a challenge in Kentucky that also led to a good decision. That's before the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court could hear, a case on the gender affirming care bans targeting youth as early as this coming fall, when the Supreme Court, takes up the session again in October. And there's also cases moving forward, in other parts of the country into the appellate courts. There's cases pending right now in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is most of the middle states there, and in the 10th Circuit as well. So just a little bit of a snapshot where we are with the work to fight against the trans bans on healthcare for youth. Another issue area that we do a lot of intensive work on is defending trans youth with regard to access to facilities. This is a picture of one of our lead plaintiff in a challenge in Oklahoma to a bathroom ban bill that was passed into law. And that is currently moving through the courts now, and there aren't a lot of challenges around the country, but another significant challenge that was brought that I think Kel might talk a little bit more about was filed in Idaho, where there was just recently an appeal to the 9th Circuit, and one of our colleagues, Peter Wren, who's amazing, did an oral argument just about a month ago there, and so we're expecting a decision there as well. I think one thing to flag, and these stars again represent other cases that are being brought from other organizations, and I flagged Indiana just because and SCOTUS because I think it's important to. I think there's a lot of concern, rightfully, about what might happen at the Supreme Court if one of these cases works its way up, to the court. But I think it's important to note that the Supreme Court hasn't always, issued decisions, opposing LGBTQ rights and has actually supported trans rights, including the Bostock decision that was issued not too long ago. And on the bathroom ban front, the court, refused to take up a case that was an appeal from an Indiana ruling in support of trans youth that made its way up to the appeals court and then to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court didn't take it up, meaning that the ruling stands, the supportive ruling, and on behalf of trans youth, in those 3 states and where Indiana sits in the 7th Circuit. Fighting for legal recognition is another, area of work that we do on behalf of non-binary and trans folks. Pictured here are our lead plaintiffs, Kayla Gore in Tennessee, who is an absolute amazing advocate, and Rowan Fowler, who is lead plaintiff in our challenge in Oklahoma. And in both of these cases, the states have refused to update, allow trans folks to update their birth certificates to reflect who they are. And so we've, both appealed both cases, to the circuit courts, and we're waiting for decisions in those issue areas. Just one note on emerging trends is that, we are starting to see, unfortunately, in related to the bills that Kevin pointed out, we're starting to see states seeking to try to roll back access to legal recognition for driver's licenses and IDs. And there's been a couple of places, including Florida and Kansas, who have issued recently troubling rulemaking that would try to prohibit those kinds of amendments. So that's likely an issue area that we'll see more litigation around in the coming years. I know I don't have much time here, but I just want to go over some other legal developments, that are huge victories. Pictured here is our named plaintiff in a challenge to Medicaid exclusions in West Virginia, and this is a huge and really important issue area for non-binary and trans folks. We know that it's the folks that are at least privileged among us who are using accessing healthcare through Medicaid, and it's just so important that this work be continued. And Shante brought a challenge to West Virginia's categorical exclusion of gender affirming care under their Medicaid plan, which led to a significant decision just that we received just recently. There was a victory in the state level in West Virginia on the trial court level, and then a huge victory in the 4th Circuit, which is a group of states, just about a month ago. So enormous victory. And then there was also another great victory in Florida, involving Medicaid exclusion that was brought, as well. So, and then a state employee plan in North Carolina that was joined with the case in West Virginia. Other victories include, the victory that Percy touched on, that, we received an amazing and powerful injunction against the Don't Say Gay or Trans, bill that was passed there, keeping that law from going into effect. And then there was also a huge victory in California recently defending trans folks in prisons. That Lambda Legal has been involved in all these cases, where we were able to get a case dismissed that was trying to overturn a really powerful law protecting trans folks in prisons and jails. And we're also, doing litigation in Maryland on this issue. So I will close. I'm really excited to talk about at some point, particularly what folks, that are out there are eager to, ways in which folks that are here and watching can get involved and move protections and protect trans youth and trans people generally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sasha. And I neglected to mention Sasha is coming to us from our Washington, D.C. office, and I'm in New York. We're next going to go to Dallas, where we're going to hear from our Deputy Legal Director, Paul Castillo, who has been on the front lines of the fights in Texas, which are many, I am sorry to say, around LGBTQ plus equality. Paul, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just wanted to express my thanks and gratitude in particular to Percy for your bravery, your perseverance, for standing up when others are unable to stand up for the rights of trans and non-binary students all across the country, and in particular in your state. You have been an incredible advocate for the students across the country who need to hear voices like yours about what they can do to stand up and how they can navigate their lives in school environments. As Kevin mentioned, our school environments in particular are under attack. In fact, from last year's 510 bills, approximately half of those had to deal with limiting access and ingraining discrimination in school environments, particularly with trans and non-binary folks. Schools should be safe havens to protect all students so that they can learn and thrive and be successful. But hostile and discriminatory school climates, particularly because of the bills and the rhetoric that we've seen throughout the past several years, pose a major threat to young people's ability to thrive and even navigate their daily lives in school. With respect to what we're seeing, some of these statistics many of you have already seen before, but it bears repeating that in the last GLSEN's National School Climate Survey, 83% of LGBTQI plus students face harassment, bullying, discrimination, and assault in K through 12 settings. 62% of those students never reported the incident to school staff because of the environment, because of the lack of safe spaces, because of the confusion caused by these bills and laws across the country. Schools can be especially hostile environments to trans and non-binary students, absent strong measures to affirm and protect them. Transgender and non-binary students are more likely to experience victimization, bullying, and to report more negative school environments. Tragically, nearly 27% of transgender youth reported that they have been physically threatened or harmed in the past year due to their gender identity. We have seen these effects of the states introducing the bills and passing laws enabling the hostile climate, emboldening harassment and bullying of students through various mechanisms, some of which we will talk about today. In fact, we see this arise through limiting essential guidance documents and with respect to non-discrimination policies at school, or chilling participation by students in GSAs, denying access to facility sports and other education program and activities. We see this by erasing non-binary and trans lives in books and in library shelves and classrooms all across the country. But Lambda Legal has shown up to protect and defend trans students. As Percy talked about the litigation that he's involved in, we are seeing many of these type of laws and or bills crop up all across the country. many of those having don't say gay or trans provisions that explicitly censor discussions of LGBTQ people or issues in programs, curriculum, instruction, effectively prohibiting any mention of gender identity or sexual orientation. And approximately now 8 states have done so. But the other mechanism that is baked into some of these laws is the forced outing provisions. 7 states explicitly require school staff to out our trans youth to their families, often without regard to whether doing so may put them at risk of harm. Additionally, many other states have laws that promote the outing of trans students, such as through vague requirements of notification of parents about any, quote, health or behavioral concern. And we've also seen that through the removal and censorship of books. One of the things that I think it's important to tell is that we continue to fight in courts and with education programs all across the country. In the Iowa Safe Schools versus Reynolds case, our lawyers will be arguing in the next week to defend our stopping temporarily of the don't say gay or trans provisions and the banned books from going into effect. It is currently at the 8th Circuit where we are defending that win, and we will continue to tell stories of students like Percy and all the other Iowa students in that endeavor. With respect to access to facilities, as Sasha had mentioned, Cal and Peters and many other staff from all across the country are engaged in challenging some of these laws that are denying access to facilities. In particular, I want to highlight 2 of our cases from Oklahoma and from Idaho, both of which have received both of which are now at the appellate level and will be being decided by a panel of judges. And Cal, I just have to give congratulations to you and the rest of the Lambda legal team for stopping that law from preliminarily going into effect and for defending that at the 9th Circuit. As many of you know, Title IX final rules have been issued, which will be effective in August 1st, making clear that sexual orientation and gender identity are forms of sex discrimination. We are well aware of a concerted effort by 26 states and others challenging these rules, but make no mistake, Lambda Legal has been in courts long before these rules, advocating for the Title IX rights of trans and non-binary students and winning in many cases in suits all across our country. And as you know, the fights in athletic participation and in denial of access to facilities shows Title IX itself has long protected trans and non-binary students, and we will continue to do so. The last bucket that I will talk about briefly is that it's important to note that there are legal challenges throughout the country over the past several years challenging affirming policies, which are important to protect and defend the rights of trans and non-binary students and minimize the hostile environments that we're seeing at schools. Lambda Legal has shown up along in these lawsuits, in amicus briefs and other friend of the court papers, often partnering with our partners from PFLAG, GLSEN, the Trevor Project, and many others to illuminate for the courts the harm that trans and non-binary students can and do experience as a result of these policies. There's wide-ranging implications for students' academic experiences, safe school climate, and the mental health of LGBTQ plus students. Supportive school environments are essential and vital to all young people, and especially trans and non-binary people who are recognizing and expressing their gender identity. Again, as Sasha said, we see you, we respect you, your bravery is inspirational, and we thank you for what you are doing and navigating the hate and rhetoric that you see around on your daily lives. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Paul. Our final speaker, last but not least, is Kel Olson. Kel is coming to us from our Western region, where he is based in Tucson. He is a staff attorney and the F. Kurt Kirschner strategist for LGBTQ plus seniors' rights. Kel.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so happy to be here with all of you and to hear everything everyone has had to say. It's always really nice to be able to step back and see the bigger picture and come up for a minute and really see the breadth of what's going on here. So thank you for having the chance to do this today and to be with so many of you. I'm going to briefly touch on just a couple of other buckets because they are, of course, things that we could be talking about for a much longer period of time. But I'll talk a little bit about identity documents in healthcare here and just give a couple examples a little bit on each of a couple of cases. So first of all, everyone needs accurate identity documents. These documents are essential for navigating life, and for transgender people, having a document that doesn't match your name or gender identity is a scary thing. It can expose you to harassment and abuse, whether it's at a hotel check-in or a traffic stop. You're often required to hand your document in person to a stranger, not knowing what their reaction might be. As Sasha noted earlier, we've been fighting this type of access and ability for people to update to accurate documents in many places over many years. You saw pictures of plaintiffs from Kansas and Tennessee. I wanted to talk for a moment about our current case in Oklahoma, Fowler v. Stitt, which is one of a handful of states in Oklahoma that still completely bars people from updating their birth certificates when it comes to transgender people wanting to update markers. Now, the state does allow people to update their birth certificates for other reasons like adoption and other things. So like we see in many of these laws, the exception is really just carved right around the transgender community to really target what people are going through. So I have a little map here on the next slide, if I can pop through. That just shows, this is from the Movement Advancement Project, which is a great resource of current issue areas and status of laws across the country. And it shows that there are just a handful of 5 states on here reflecting that they're not allowing changes at all. And a number of other states have restrictions of other various sorts. So in Oklahoma, it's really an example of laws not just going in one direction. We aren't just removing these kind of restrictions steadily. In Oklahoma, for example, people were able to change their birth certificates and update them for many years, since at least 2007. And the gender markers for trans people, including gender markers for trans people, until 2021, when the governor issued an executive order barring state agencies from amending birth certificates for transgender people. We brought a lawsuit there arguing the policy was discriminatory and a violation of the right to privacy. On our first round of litigation, the trial court upheld the ban and dismissed the claims. So in March of this year, our Lambda Legal colleague Peter Wren argued in front of the 10th Circuit, asking them to reverse that decision. Now, we're still waiting to see what they do there, but I personally really enjoyed certain moments during that argument where the judges really seemed to get it. At least one judge noted during argument that the state can keep an original copy if it needs an original copy for its purposes, but that people just wanted to update their document to carry with them that matches their license, that matches their gender. And I think she got to the core of the issue by just asking the simple question to the state, what's the big deal? That was literally the words from the bench, is why are you not allowing people to just be able to move through their lives without risking harassment? So we continue to fight that really important fight. And I also wanted to speak for a moment to the fight for access to healthcare and Lambda Legal's response to one of the most coordinated and drastic attacks on transgender people and their families. And Sasha gave a great picture of what we're doing across the country in many places. I want to highlight one of those cases and ongoing work in this area, which is our challenge to a law that Montana passed in the last legislative session, barring all gender affirming care for minors while allowing those same treatments for all other purposes. So last May, Lambda Legal and our co-counsel and sister organizations brought a lawsuit on behalf of minors, their parents, and providers of care. This is one of those rare lawsuits. As Sasha mentioned, a lot of our plaintiffs, for very good reason, proceed anonymously. This is one of our families that wanted to be named. And so I checked in with them again yesterday just to make sure they were still happy having their picture up, because it is a really sensitive time and people are being very brave in doing this. And one thing of note is kind of a rare photo sort of out in the wilderness, because sometimes, especially working with younger people, we like to meet them where they are. And I said, where can we talk and get to know each other? We don't have to sit around a conference table. And they had a nature walk near their house and invited me out to do that while we were up there for a hearing the following day. So these are the Vanguardians from the Vanguardian versus State of Montana case. I'm happy to say that in September, we had a victory in that case where the judge, our state court judge, blocked the law, finding that it violated the state of Montana's constitution in at least a couple of ways, if not more. And the interesting note about this case is that it is brought in state court, and it really builds on the rights that Montanans have under their state constitution, which means regardless of what happens federally, if the state of Montana's constitution provides them with additional protections, then those protections will survive on their own. Of course, the state appealed our victory there to the Montana Supreme Court, because in that state, they just have 2 levels of court. And so as of today, we have fully briefed that case, and we're awaiting word from the Montana Supreme Court on whether they will uphold that decision. And we are really hoping that they will continue those statewide protections that we've been able to win for those families. I will say this family has been very personally powerful to me, and talking, as I have with many parents, especially as a parent myself and as a trans person, I find myself connecting with a lot of the families we're working with on many levels. And they remind me, we talk a lot about the survival of our trans youth, and to them, it's about so much more. And we want to do more than survive. We want to have our young people like Scarlett pictured here, who's going to be headed off to college and is doing really well, to be thriving and doing all of the things she needs to be doing in her life, not merely surviving. And we're really glad to fight alongside all of them.
Thank you, Cal. We have about 20 minutes left, and the questions have been coming in fast and furious. So we're going to go to questions now. Feel free to put some in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as humanly possible. And I think we could pull up the first question. Caitlin from Massachusetts asked, what do we need to do in 2024 to prepare for the 2025 legislative year, particularly to protect trans people and youth? And I think, Sasha, you were going to take a crack at this one.
I am, but I would be grateful if other folks want to chime in here too, if you want to add things that you think are important for folks to think about. And this is something that I just, say in, on any panel that I'm on, but, it's just so important that people vote. and if you don't know this already, it makes me sad that, the numbers of people that are under 30 that don't vote are astronomically high, and it's shocking, and it's so important. We're not taking a position on any political party, but just, it's really important that you take the time and register to vote. In some places, you have to register 2 months before an election. So, one thing would be just to go to vote.gov, vote.gov, and just, register to vote and vote, and a second thing would be to, find out who your state legislator is and find out who your state representative is. Even when I talk to, a group of lawyers, I'm always shocked how few people have any idea who their state legislator is or who the state senator is. And these are the people that are voting on these things. And believe me, if we're not talking to these folks, the people that are opposed to LGBTQ rights and specifically for trans rights are talking to them. They are having conversations with them. It's so important that folks take the time and just meet with them. And it's so easy to find them. You just go to usa.gov. That's usa.gov, and you can find out who your state senator is or who your state legislator is, and find out who they are and give them a call. They track every time you contact a legislative office, they track the calls, and so it's really important that you take some the time to just contact them and ask them what they're doing to support trans rights, and trans youth in particular, and just ask them an open-ended question like that, and express your support for trans youth and ask them to do more than they're doing, and then the last thing would be to be really conscious about how you spend your money. There's a lot of politicians get a lot of funding from different organizations, and you can go to a website called opensecrets.org, and you can find out which companies have donated to which politician. There's a lot of folks out there that are really opposed to LGBTQ rights and specifically trans rights, and just take some time and figure out whether the tennis shoes you're wearing, whether the company of the tennis shoes you're wearing have donated to some of these politicians that are really pushing hard on some of this anti-trans legislation that Kevin touched on. So those are three things that I would lift up. I think just being on the call is a huge win. You're getting up to speed on all of these issues, and we're always here as a resource to help people. If you need more information, you can always connect with me offline. But those are some top lines that I like to bring up in any of these kinds of conversations as we head into the 2025 legislative session and just the election generally, and just the upcoming years. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues if you want to add anything more to that.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. Let's go to our next question, which is, Lambda Legal has won injunctions blocking the implementation of some anti-trans legislation. Let me do an editorial interjection at this moment. There have been 15 rulings on trans healthcare to date. We have won 11 of them. That is an 85% win rate. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Which kinds of cases might end up at the Supreme Court, and what do you anticipate is the likely outcome? Who would like to take that one?
I can start with it again. I actually have to leave in about a minute here, so I'll just turn it over to other folks that want to chime in here. But I just want to re-up what I had mentioned in my section of the presentation. I think people have, a lot of concerns about, what the Supreme Court might do or might not do. But I think it's really important to remember that this is a court that issued the Bostock decision supporting LGBTQ workers and interpreting sex discrimination to include LGBTQ folks. It's also a court that, didn't take up a case challenging a bathroom ban in Indiana, as I mentioned. It's a court that didn't strike down, didn't enforce an injunction prohibiting Becky, Pepper Jackson from participating. So I think it's really important that, we remember that, we have made these arguments, for many, many years in supporting LGBTQ, folks and youth in particular. And, the district courts have agreed with us by and large. And I am cautiously optimistic that will carry through, if we make the arguments we need to make and create the kind of record we need to make for any kind of litigation at the Supreme Court.
Would anyone else like to jump in?
I will say that it's always difficult to predict sort of the magic criteria that the Supreme Court is looking for. But what is important is that the cases that we and many other organizations have brought to protect and defend trans and non-binary people are critically important, not only for the everyday lives of people, but for our entire country, because we all are guaranteed to be equal, to thrive, and to navigate in our own lives, and to be valued and respected. And whatever case comes before the Supreme Court, whatever subject matter it will be, what is important is that we highlight the stories of these plaintiffs, of the people who have spent years in the courts, working with Lambda Legal, working with other organizations, telling the courts how this has impacted their lives, how it is harming them, how these discriminatory measures are impacting not only them, but the people around them who love and care about them. And so, every time we go to court, we have that in mind, that it is important that these aren't just cases in legal terms, but at its core, trans and non-binary people deserve the same access to equality and justice as any other person. And we will be there standing alongside with them as we've continued to do for the past 50 years, and will do so for the next 50 years and beyond.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to go to our next question, which comes from Sean from Massachusetts. Sean writes, I am a parent of 2 queer kids in a, quote, safe, unquote, state, but we don't feel safe, especially looking ahead to the election. What actions can I take when I live in a place that, at the moment, is not directly impacted by these laws?
I'll take that, Kevin. Sean, thank you for that question. And, I think you are asking the right questions about protecting queer youth. There is no safe states out there, because even in states where there are no statewide discriminatory measures impacting queer youth, these crop up in local school districts all across the country, in every state in our union. And so it is important to be vigilant, to keep apprised of, for example, Sasha mentioned voting, participation and keeping in mind your local school board elections is quite critical to maintain the safe and affirming policies that many school districts across the country have. Those are being challenged by large measure in many cases all across the country, and we need to continue to protect those good informing policies which improve campus climate and improve the lives of LGBTQI plus students. The other thing I will say is that it is important to encourage youth to be themselves every day, to have access to the type of books and stories that, so they can see themselves in terms of the successes that trans and non-binary folks, and see for themselves a future that we all aspire to have for them. It is also important not only to participate in your local school board conversation, but also to reach out to your local community centers or local groups who all have fantastic programs for LGBTQ and queer youth. So thank you for asking that question. I speak to many parents out there, and they have similar concerns, and you're very right to say that, there is not a safe space. But I also want to know that there are very large majority of people, individual school administrators, supportive teachers, GSA sponsors. I want to direct this to you and say thank you. Thank you for your support of LGBTQ plus students who are navigating the halls in the schools, for creating safe spaces for them. The work that you're doing is critically important, and we know with all of this going on across the country, that it makes your lives in teaching and imparting knowledge to schools very difficult and frustrating, and we are with you and we see you as well. Kevin.
First of all, as a former teacher, I want to say amen to Paul's final comment. And we'll go to one more question. So if we can pull up the next question. This is from Sarah from Tennessee. What is the best way we can fight the anti-trans and anti-LGBT legislation happening in our state? Sorry, it's Laura from Missouri. I mixed up the questions. Sorry. Thank you, Laura.
I think these both get to, to a lot of the same core issues, which is, how can we be involved on the ground? And I know sometimes people look around thinking, seeing someone do this type of work that Lambda Legal does and thinking it's somehow more powerful than other types of work. And for those of us who've worked at direct service and, different community organizing and as a teacher and in this work, I can tell you none of it's more important than the other. It's all critical and it all needs to be happening. And we need to be putting our skills where we have them and fighting as hard as we can. But we cannot in the courts move things along to a degree that's much further along than the populace itself and the understanding of people, and judges are people as well. And so we all have to be moving together. And I think, first of all, on a technical level, I just want to uplift what Paul said earlier about being aware of what's happening on the local level. And just an example I've seen here in Arizona, that I've talked to a number of teachers and school administrators who thought things became law that did not become law. So some of the censorship bills and things we're seeing across the country that were vetoed here, people thought were in place and were being instructed that they could not speak to students about things based on these new laws. So it is really important, even in states where some of these things are not passing, to be really engaged at the school district level, at the community level, to know what's happening and help with that education where you can. On a technical matter with the state bills, there's often a local network of organizations in each state of people who are finding people to testify for and against bills. Supporting those folks is really important, even if you're not someone who has a personal story to tell. A lot of times young people are having to stand up and testify where they shouldn't have to. And it's really nice to have supportive adults around those people in those hostile environments. If you can go that day and even just be in the room and thank people afterward, or connect with other people who might be good to testify. So find those local networks of people who are testifying for and against bills, and usually you can find those publicly. And then on a just person-to-person level, as I mentioned first, is speaking up, even if you are not well-versed in some of these things and you feel like you don't quite maybe understand the ins and outs of gender-affirming care, or athletics is complicated, but there are some big picture things we can all do. Just calling into question these statewide approaches to blanket bans on things, and at the very least, asking some questions of people who are having concerns and saying, well, is it not true that medical care is really personal? And it really, is it not true that there are many athletes at different ages participating in different ways? And I think just being willing to speak up, even if you don't fully know all the ins and outs yourself, is important. As someone who, just to show you're someone who cares, who can ask questions, who can think critically about these things, and who can understand that a lot of these are very drastic blanket attacks on a whole population. And we at least can speak to that usually, even if we don't understand all the ins and outs. To the extent you are safe and feel like you can do so, coming out as yourself, as an ally, as a family member of a trans person, can be very, very powerful for how people move through the world and understand that trans people aren't just those people out there somewhere, but are a person they're connected to. It's the same thing we've dealt with in so many stages throughout our movement, and it's still as true today.
Thank you, Kel. And the final question we're going to be able to take is from Sarah from Tennessee this time. How can someone not working in legal support the organization's efforts best? So I want to summarize. You've heard various suggestions from my colleagues, but I think you have 4 assets you should keep in mind: your voice, your vote, your time, and your money. As Kel was just mentioning, your voice. If you are and you're safe to do so, LGBTQ+, come out. It has been the most effective way to reduce prejudice towards LGBTQ plus people. Call your state legislature, regardless of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. Let them know you care. Show up at your local school board meeting. Contribute a book to your local library. Those are all ways you can use your voice. Your vote, it goes without saying, vote in every election and let candidates know that equality is an important issue to you. Your time, volunteer your time with local groups. Not everybody has to be a lawyer. There are various ways you can help. Hey, if you're a great graphic designer, call me. We need a volunteer graphic designer at Lambda Legal. Fourth, your money. If you have financial resources that you can share with organizations doing good work, contribute them. People seem to be unaware that over 70% of charitable giving in America comes from individuals like me and you, not from corporations, not from foundations, from everyday people. That's who funds our movement. So if you're able to share some dollars with an organization you care about, please do so. I've been watching the comments as best I can during this, and Mr. Landis made an important point that there are groups across the country fighting to stop these laws from passing in the first place so that Lambda Legal doesn't have to go to court. So get in touch, for example, with your statewide equality group. Ask them how you can help. Give them time and money. There are lots of organizations doing very important work, and I urge you to contribute to ones that you really believe in. So remember, you have a voice, you have a vote, you have time, and maybe you have some money. Use those 4 assets. If we can go to the final slide, please. You've heard a lot about legal theory and lawsuits and other things today, but I want to remind you that behind every lawsuit, there's a human being like Percy. And that is the bottom line. I've become very close over the last couple of years to Becky Pepper Jackson, the amazing young woman who is the plaintiff in our West Virginia lawsuit, trying to win the rights of trans young people to compete on their sports teams. And on Mother's Day 3 weeks ago, I got a text from Becky's mom, Heather. Here's what it said. Hello. You should know that on Mother's Day, as a mother, I am celebrating the organization that is fighting for my daughter. Your organization has helped me, help my child keep her here on earth and thriving. Thanks to you, Becky is so happy for Lambda's work and for helping us fight for what's right. Folks, behind every lawsuit, behind every decision, there's a human being and thousands of others like them whose lives will be made better if we win. Thank you for your support. Thank you for helping us win. And we plan to keep fighting for another 50 years until there's full equality for all LGBTQ plus people and everyone living with HIV. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.